this edition of the Human School's Mindshift Cards Conversation, a part of our learning journey here at the Human School. I'm Chad.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Randy.
Each week, we will model brief inquiry conversations around one of our Mindshift cards. If you want to explore further questions, card sets are available at thehuman.school. In this episode, our question comes from the Objector Compass Point. The question is, how do you define curiosity? What does it look like, sound like, or feel like to be actively curious? Variations of this question are things like how you can describe how you might be curious or what you're curious about, or describe someone who is curious and how you know that they might be curious. So I'll get us started. The way that I define curiosity is just this active pursuit of knowledge and wonder. It's just wanting to ask more and more questions. That a good question leads to more and more questions, and it just continues to get you down the rabbit hole. And so for me, an example of what this feels like is when you're on the internet and you keep following those links to drive deeper and deeper because you want to learn more and more. So, that's kind of my off the top of my head thinking around curiosity. Rachel, I'm wondering what you would say.
So I'm thinking about someone who is curious. So I've talked about him before, but my son is 2.5, and he is in that epitome stage of why? What is that? He's incredibly detail oriented. He notices things that I would never have noticed had he not brought it up. But he's really curious and trying to decide how to help him understand in a way that makes sense for his age, and then also leave space for him to still be curious about something, letting him discover on his own. I don't know, you tell me, or what do you think? Is a really fun experience in terms of curiosity.
So Chad, you said look, sound, and feel like. I'm going to go with feel like. And I think a lot of people lose their curiosity because sometimes curiosity can feel uncomfortable. It can feel like we are asking questions, and sometimes those questions make people feel uncomfortable, and then that makes us feel like we're not socially accepted sometimes. So I oftentimes find myself probably tempering my questions a little bit too much, or at least thinking about my audience, which is probably a good thing. Think about the audience and, how will they take that question? Or how could I get my curiosity out there in a way that people will want to engage with it and become more curious alongside of me? So I think sometimes curiosity can make us feel uncomfortable.
One of the things that we oftentimes talk about is I always define the success of a schooling experience is if our kids left us more curious than when they arrived, right? I mean, we oftentimes say that there's no one more curious than that kid who walks into kindergarten the first day. And unfortunately, the system has kind of driven that out of many of our learners. I don't know if we could find many learners who leave a school system more curious than when they entered it. So I think one of my big questions around curiosity is how do we ensure that our learners leave more curious than when they entered?
So that's one thing you're curious about.
Yeah.
I think one thing I'm curious about is more like dealing with current events. So I'm not sure when this will get posted, but right now I think the whole idea of democracy, I'm just curious, like, where are we going with that? If you look historically back 20 years when Putin became president of Russia, and where it is now and where democracies around the world are now, it seems like democracy is kind of eroding. So I'm curious about what is this trajectory that we're on, and how can we take the long view? How can we think into the future? Sort of taking this back to the human school. How can we think into the future and start to design that by looking at the signals that we see in the present? That's a curiosity I've got.
Yeah, I'm thinking similarly around this idea of like why we're in the situation that we're in. And I think about that too in terms of teaching. So my job is to coach teachers, new and seasoned. And I think oftentimes we get so frustrated by what happens with students and how they react to things and whether they're interested or not and how much effort we've put into planning our lessons, and it can feel really terrible. um, but I think often one of the things that I forget to do and would like to try to do more often is to encourage that same curiosity with my teachers, and with my colleagues and my friends. you know and I think my question would be, how can we support ourselves and prepare ourselves for what the answers might be? I think that sometimes we are afraid to ask the questions that we have. We're afraid to listen to what the answers might be. And I wonder, too, how to help us feel not comfortable, because that's not the goal, but to feel accepting, or I guess open to whatever that feedback is. How can I help teachers feel prepared to receive that feedback and then open to it as well? Because in some ways it might really surprise us, and in other ways it might not always feel great. But I think not asking students why this lesson didn't go well, or what they would like to learn, I think might be a missed opportunity. But it's one that I think we definitely want to feel prepared for, in case the answer isn't what we had hoped it would be.
So a wondering I have, or a question I have around your line of thinking there, Rachel, is, are we being curious if we have a predetermined idea of what we hope the answer might be? So I think curiosity, a way that I might maybe create a distinction around curiosity, is asking a question that we don't have a legitimate answer for, as opposed to asking a question. So, I think that about Covey, seek first to understand. I think there's times where we listen to people and we're just waiting for our chance to respond, as opposed to being genuinely curious about where they want to take us and being open to that. And I oftentimes talk about that as being, what are the unintended outcomes of that curiosity. So I really love your thinking around how we can be more open, um, through our curiosity with folks, and not being afraid of the answers and not taking that personally, but really truly authentically being open to hearing the things that they want to share, and how that modeling might allow our teacher friends to be open to their learners' curiosities and wonderings and challenges. And remember, this question comes from the objector mind shift, and so objector compass point. And so one thing I would be interested in the two of you just sharing a little bit about is, how does curiosity play into that compass point of being an objector, and how might we think about curiosity in a way that is not about being disagreeable? Because I think sometimes people interpret being an objector as being disagreeable. Like, I don't agree with that. That's not really the intention here. So I'm wondering if the both of you would want to elaborate on that.
So one of the things that I recall as we were putting these ideas together was the word objector, because it was really around the time where we had a lot of, at least in the public school sector, a lot of parents going to board meetings and objecting, and lots of boards, and lots of the idea of the objector, and wondering if we were going to have some sort of negative connotation to the word objector. But I think that we went with it because we can shape the meaning of that too. And I think you're right, Chad, that you can be an objector without being disagreeable. And I think this is where we bring in the idea of empathy. And I think that you have to understand, who is your audience, who are you speaking to, and sort of bringing in, as you're inventing your conversation, bringing in that idea of, I'm speaking with human beings, and I need to teach to treat them with respect, and that they're imperfect just like I am, and they have certain identities, certain mindsets. And if I differ or I disagree with that, and I want to be an objector to something, maybe system wide, or maybe in this particular small conversation that I'm having, I need to be really sensitive to where that person is placing themselves in relation to the topic that we're talking about. And I think that's where we talk about the art of enrollment and how do we really use empathy and compassion and understanding and listening to really engage in a conversation where all of our ideas can get moved forward, not just the others' ideas moving forward, but my own as well, that I can learn from that too.
Yeah, I appreciate both of your points. And it makes me think too about there's an element of letting go that has to happen in order for us to really be curious. As teachers, we often come into the profession with an idea of what it is that we believe that kids should know. Um, and in order for us to be curious, we have to be willing to let go of some of that preconceived notion or hope. And it's true as parents too, with what we hope for our children, versus maybe what they want, and making sure that we are able to leave space for whatever that might be. And I appreciate the distinction of disagreeable. I'm working my way through Adam Grant's Think Again, and I just finished the chapter where he talks about the different types of being disagreeable, and that disagreeable with a purpose. Are you objecting in order to help the other person grow and move forward? But I think that comes in conjunction with the willingness to let whatever the forward is be, regardless of what you hoped it to be. Not you're moving them forward to the thing that you hope that they go for. And I think that distinction is hard. It requires some practice. And I mean, even Grant talks about not being great at it or not doing it fully. But it's difficult to be curious, especially as an adult with a child, without those preconceived notions and intentions for what they're doing next, and allowing them space to maybe do differently than what you had hoped.
And Rachel, as we kind of wrap up here, I think that's especially powerful in classrooms, where so much of what we have in front of us are predetermined, and the tension between curriculum and assessments and bell schedules that are structured and intended to ensure that people are within those boxes. And then this thing that we all innately know about learning, which is that it's not really controllable and there's no real box. And, we talk a lot about the art of possibility, and that, this is all made up. And so when you talk about that curiosity as a parent, I think about it in the classroom, how so much of what we do is to our kids and to our teachers, and the public does to the system itself, and doesn't leave the space for that objectorship and curiosity that we know is so critical to create great learning experiences. So I really appreciate the conversation today, guys. And, as we kind of wrap up here, we know that all good inquiries lead to more curiosity. And we hope that you have some new curiosities as a result of our conversation. And we hope that as you begin to shift your thinking and shift your mindsets, that you'll share those thoughts and ideas and questions with us at our community inside the Human.School. And we wanted to thank you so much for learning alongside us today. Visit the Human.School and its Learning and Public Hub for additional resources and to join the conversation. And you can join our Facebook community, which is committed to placing humanity at the center of all design. Thanks so much, you two. It was great chatting with you.